Hi everyone, you're listening to She Leads with Carly. Our guest today is Jenny Ming. Guys, this one is such a great one. Jenny's career has enabled her to make a significant dent in the retail world. From starting off at Gap as a merchandise manager, to taking every opportunity as they come and becoming the president of Old Navy for 7 years. We talk about her long time at Gap Inc. and Old Navy, and how she removed the fear of failure that really allowed her to learn throughout each challenge. As she made her way through the retail world, whether it's a CEO, Charlotte Russe, or now a board member for Levi, Strauss & Company, Jenny teaches us the key traits to being an incredible leader through accessibility and authenticity. She dives into this so much more, and I really hope you enjoy it as much as I did. Hello, Jenny. Thank you so much for coming on to She Leads today. I'm so excited to just get to know you and highlight your incredible career. So thank you for coming on the show.
Well, first of all, thank you for thinking of me. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Of course. So, Jenny, you are a member of the board for really incredible, well-known companies. So first, Levi Strauss & Company for 6 years, Poshmark, Paper Source, and even prior to this, you were also the former president and CEO of Charlotte Russe, if I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Yes, Charlotte Russe.
Perfect. So another clothing retail company. And then you're also the former president of Gap Old Navy for around 7 years, and prior to that, you held the senior VP and executive VP role. So, wow, I'm really excited to just hear your story. So, what I love to do is really take me back to, San Jose State University. You got a bachelor's in fashion, merchandising, and marketing. So, first, did you always have this passion for fashion, if you will? And where did it stem from? Yeah.
Yeah, first of all, I always love clothes. I know it sounds kind of, funny to even say that. But actually, I did not expect to be a buyer. Actually, when I was in San Jose State, my first, I wanted to be a home economics teacher. I know it sounds so dated, like, what is that? But during my junior years, California school system decided it wasn't academic enough. So they kind of like mixed it in the curriculum. So before I even graduate, I was out of a job.
Wow.
So my boyfriend then, who is now my husband, said, Jenny, you should be a buyer. You love clothes. I mean, literally, that was the conversation. Yeah. But you have to remember, I was 20 years old. And so I actually accidentally went into this business. And I have to say, it's better than I ever thought possible. How I fell into retail, fell into apparel merchandising.
Yeah, incredible. So, okay, so at this moment, was there a time in your life, or like in this moment, where you was this like a short-term career, or did you think long-term, like I could stay in fashion for many years to come, or was this just like, let me do this to get by in the next year or two?
I wish I was that thoughtful, insightful, and all of that. But no, I actually, when I graduated, I just wanted to be a buyer. That was my ambition.
Yeah.
To be a buyer. And you know what? I think retail, once I got into retail, it has so much more than being just a buyer.
Right.
But I just did not know enough about it. So I didn't. And I was one of those people that maybe is not as planful as a lot of people today. I kind of took one step at a time. And I have to say, I really enjoy every single step, no matter what I did in retail.
Amazing. And I think that's a good lesson for right now, because it's what we're going through right now. It's almost teaching us, you can't really plan for years and years in advance, because anything can happen. So I love that.
And I also think sometimes when you don't plan is when you are much more open-minded.
Yeah.
Versus like you're planful and you're like, well, at 30, I want to be a vice president. By 35, I want to run a company. I think when you have that kind of plan, sometimes it stops you thinking a little differently when opportunity comes knocking, right?
Right.
Because it might not be in your plan, but might be the best thing you could do. Right. So I think sometimes not planning is actually a good thing.
Yeah. And I think your story shows that very well, because, you wouldn't have found fashion and continued it. So, okay, so now tell me your first job, and really take me through your career in a way, and really, what kept you in this industry and what kept you so passionate about it, and how did you really transform and go through step by step?
I was a buyer when I got a call from Mickey Drexler from the Gap. I was the second merchandise manager that Mickey brought into the Gap. At that time, Gap was not the big company it is today, of course. And, my background has always been in women. So he called and literally, I just read about him in a magazine, and there was this phone call. I wasn't thinking about leaving my job at Mervyn's, but he was quite famous in our business. So I met him, and seriously, within 5-10 minutes of conversation, I knew I wanted to work for him.
Wow.
Because he was a really great listener, and he really looks at it in the points of view of a consumer or a customer. And so I said yes and joined the company. And I was running, I was a buyer for men's activewear.
Okay.
Like I said, I only been in women's, so I never bought men's before. So that was a challenge, but I was also excited to do something different too.
Yeah.
And, it started out being a fairly small department. There's only 5 items in men's activewear. And I was in charge of growing the business. So, of course, you add new product category and, assortment. But I think I did one thing that was very simple. And, I think nobody ever thought about that. So first thing I did was I said, well, there's no women's active. So what I did for the men's active was made it unisex.
Wow.
So what does that mean? I added extra small and extra large. So it really broadened the customer base. And then I also added feminine color. So like a pocket t-shirt. Why is it only men's? Women wears pocket tee.
Oh my goodness.
So of course I added pink and yellow and all the girly color. But I of course anchored a lot of masculine color too. Just by that little simple thing of a lens through unisex, I was able to double the business every year.
Wow, Jenny,
So-
that's incredible.
So sometimes the simple things are the answers.
Yeah.
Sometimes not the most complicated, but really understanding what the opportunity can be, and really help me grow the business.
So first, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like you were the first one to almost introduce women's activewear, or is this only in Gap, would you say? But still, it seems pretty...
Yeah, well, at that time, I didn't call it women's active
Yeah.
because I was the men's activewear buyer, so I couldn't say women,
Yeah.
but I treat it like unisex so that women can also buy men's stuff. I mean, think about yourself. I'm sure you bought men's things.
Yeah.
So especially in activewear, sweatshirts. So I made it to fit men and women. So I was able to capture this women's customer. Of course, later on, women, added activewear. But even then, I looked at it through the lens of a unisex department.
Wow, amazing. And so, okay, so now you're at Gap, and so first of all, like nowadays, it's very rare to stay at a company for longer than maybe 2-3 years. And so you stayed at Gap for more than 13 years. And so is that...
How does that happen?
Yeah, so tell me kind of, what made you stay at Gap? Did you ever question, should I be going somewhere else in my career to grow? Or what questions were you asking yourself to ensure like you're in the right place? And yeah, how did you stay for so long?
Well, first of all, I was in Gap Inc. for 20 years. I was in Gap Brand for 7 years. And Gap Brand at activewear. And, to be a buyer at 7 years is a quite a long time. But the good thing was, since I grew that department, like I said, every year pretty much doubled it. I think I started with like $50 million. By the time I was done, it was over $800 million in sale.
Yeah.
So I got promoted, I would say 3-4 years in, from a merchandise manager to a vice president DMM, divisional merchandise manager. And that doesn't happen very often. You usually get a DMM job as your next promotion, but I got a vice president and DMM.
Wow.
So I think what kept me was that I always found opportunity and challenges. So I never felt bored because there was always more to grow and more to do.
Right.
And then I took a department and made it to a division. So I never put a time on things as long as I feel I'm challenged, I'm having fun, enjoying it.
Yeah.
And then, in fact, my husband and I were thinking of moving back to Hong Kong with our kids. And when I went to talk to Mickey about it, she said, "Oh, we're thinking about starting a new division. And it's going to be value-oriented and family-focused compared to where Gap and Banana is." And you were, what we thought would be running it, part of running it. And I thought, gosh, this was such a great opportunity. So, so we decided to stay.
Yeah.
And I was employee number 1 for Old Navy. At that time, it was not called Old Navy. And then there was 3 other peers. So there's one head of marketing, one head of product development, and then one had the stores in the field. And I had the merchandising. And then I was, of course, that's my background. Then I added sourcing, planning allocation, store design, and visual merchandising. So this was the first time I was able to kind of be, instead of being a functional expert, expand, my responsibility and scope. So it was, starting to be more of a general manager. So I think that, why would I ever leave a company when I have opportunity?
Right.
So I was promoted from, vice president to senior vice president. And of course, as we grew, I became executive vice president, eventually became president. Mm-hmm. So of course, even though we were a big, a startup, but we were inside a big company. But that in itself, I have to say, there's challenges, right, to any startup.
Yeah.
And I think one of the biggest challenges, hiring. First of all, we were very fortunate that a startup had our success immediately.
Yeah.
That really does not happen. We were probably the only retail apparel brand that went to $1 billion in less than 4 years. In fact, it was 3.5 years. So there was a lot of hiring. And, even though, and any startup, you have multiple jobs, multiple hats that you wear, right? So in the morning, I would be doing strategy or working on store design. And in the afternoon, I have to remember I have to be the women's wear buyer, So, and all of a sudden, now you have to hire people in. So I would say the challenging part was really hiring, because in startup, especially when you have a Gap brand, a Banana, everybody's so quote unquote comfortable. Mm-hmm. They don't always want to join a startup. So, my goal was to hire 50% of the people from inside the company and 50 from outside. And it turned out to be different. I hired 70, 80% from the outside and 20, 30% from inside. It's because people were scared to join a startup. People were not as comfortable, which of course, looking back at it, you would think, why? I just didn't, like I always say, sometimes what you're uncomfortable with is when you learn the most, right?
Yes, definitely.
So, I would say that was a challenge. And then the second challenge is really for me to stop doing the doing, because now I have to delegate.
Right. Yes.
It's always easier when you do it yourself, but you have to start delegating, onboarding and training and communicating. So I would say it was a gradual, learning, each position. And, then, of course, I was offered the job of president of Old Navy, the first president. And the first time I was offered that, I turned it down. Could you imagine? Because just like what I said is like, we have 4 leaders.
Yeah.
And, we all did our part. And it was incredible teamwork, I have to say. We all had incredible trust on each other. Mm. We were all functional experts. So we knew as long as we aligned with the goal and we all kind of did what we need to do. And then we come back together and things all fit into places, which is pretty unusual, I have to say. But I was so fortunate to have such great partners. And when I was offered the job of president, I was really worried the dynamic of this team would change. Right. Things are going so well. Why would you want to make changes? But eventually, it's going to happen. So during that year, Mickey brought in people to interview. And then I finally realized that, gosh, if somebody comes in and became the president, how would I feel?
Right.
And I was like, I would feel bummed. So during a year later, I said to him, I said, Mickey, when you asked me about this, would I be interested? I am interested now. And he started laughing. He said, Jenny, it took you long enough to realize that. So I think this is, I think it's just so typical of women not to rock the boat. And, we don't want changes. Yeah. But even then I said, I want to make sure it's okay with everybody that I become the president, because we are peers and I so respect them. And now all of a sudden I'm the boss. How's that going to be? Mm. So again, he laughed. He said, only you would think of doing something like that. Yeah. So of course, then I took on the job of president. And that, of course, changes so much of what you do. And I had to kind of learn, as I go, being the first president.
Wow, Jenny, you sound like an incredible leader. Just the fact that you're not president, you're thinking, and you're offered the position, but you're thinking, what is best for the team and how will it change the dynamics? And I think that's just incredible. So I can go a lot of different directions from your answer, but one thing that I'm curious about is just during this time, did you it seems like, did you have to like actively advocate for yourself? Being a woman in this space. I mean, I'm sure in fashion you think that there are many women in this space, but I'm curious to know, like, did you have to advocate as a woman from Hong Kong coming to America, like all of these factors, did that come into it that really played a role in whether you're going to be promoted or whatnot?
Seriously, I really never thought much about it. But
Yeah.
I have to share one story with you um, that I learned very early on when I was a merchandise manager. Like I said, I was a fairly successful buyer, right?
Yeah.
And I was passed up for a promotion to be a DMM, and I didn't understand why. I didn't even get an interview. So I asked my boss. I said, "How come, I was, did you thought of me for this position?"
Yeah.
And so it wasn't her that was making the decision, was her boss. So I went to speak to him, and he said, "Oh, we did not know if you're this ambitious since you have 3 kids." And I thought, just because I have 3 kids doesn't mean I didn't want that job.
Yeah.
So what I learned from that is people don't always know what you're thinking.
Oh.
You can assume that. So the most important thing is making sure people know what you're thinking.
Yes.
And be as transparent as possible. I said, just because I have 3 kids, I said, also I have a very supportive husband and I have a living nanny. So I absolutely can, move, ahead with my career.
Yeah.
But people did not know because I was the only one in the entire organization that had kids at that time. I think there was one other person because, and so through my career, I have no problem being the woman.
Yeah.
And my family is very much integrated into my professional life. I never separate the two because it's who you are.
Right.
And I actually think bringing family or your feminine traits into workplace actually adds a little bit more warmth or humanity to work.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's a good thing. So
I
I think so I really am one of those believers that you have to bring your whole self, not just part of yourself.
Yes.
And it has worked out well for me.
So well. Oh,
And
I love it.
even at work, through all my years, I know a lot about teams, family and kids, husbands and wives.
Right.
And I just think it becomes much more human.
Yeah, oh, I love it, Jenny. And also, it teaches such an important lesson, even, for me, entering a new job or any place, any age, is to really be transparent with your boss, to know, this is what I hope to become, or this is kind of my intentions, or whatever it is, just because I think you're right. I think a lot of them, they come with these assumptions that they don't even question. So it's kind of just, I didn't even consider it. So I love that. I think that's really important.
In fact, afterwards, he said to me, this EVP, the senior vice president, said, "You know what, Jenny, I really have to say sorry, and I shouldn't assume that you're not ambitious, that you want to move further."
Yeah.
So he said, "I learned something." So sometimes, I love when people could say that versus like being defensive,
Yes.
but being like, you're right. I was being biased.
Exactly. Exactly. Wow. So, okay. So now you're the president, and you mentioned the challenge of hiring, because I can imagine you're not, as an entry level or junior position, a marketing manager, you really don't have that role of hiring. So that's definitely an interesting. Did you have people helping you with this or advice along the way, or how do you really navigate, this whole new dimension of who do I hire?
Well, even as president, I spent a huge amount of time on people because to me, you're only as good as the team you have.
Yeah.
So even then, being president, I actually are involved in hiring, sometimes entry level, is because it matters to me. And I want to be a leader that is very accessible. Just because you're an assistant and I'm a president doesn't mean that shouldn't have interaction. So my biggest goal is when you go into a meeting, you can't tell who's the intern or the assistant, who's the buyer, who's the president.
Yeah.
To me, that is a successful meeting.
I love it.
Because, and I want, especially in clothing and retail, they sometimes actually have the best idea because they're closer to the consumer and the customer than I am.
Yeah.
So I want for them to feel comfortable with talking and giving the point of view. Because, retail and buying is always about having a point of view.
Yes.
What do you think?
Yes.
So if you can speak about it, and if they're afraid to talk, I'm missing the best part of themselves.
Incredible.
So that's how I, like to spend my time. And of course, once you have success, everybody wants to be on your team. So hiring is not so hard then.
Yeah.
But hiring the right people and forming a team is probably is the most important.
Yeah.
So I believe in diversity of teams. So to me, if you all have a kind of cookie cutter of how you think, how you look, you don't need a team. You just do it yourself, right? So especially in retail and having different points of view and having a good debate or a conversation is so important.
Yes, definitely.
And that's how I look at it.
Yes. Oh, I love it. I really, really love it. So, okay, tell me now, what made you leave Gap, or like what happened and, transition to the next endeavor that you took on in your career. And then we'll get to, now as a board member, your role and everything. But first, what was that period like?
Well, after, 7 years at the Gap, 13 years at Old Navy, and 7 out of the 13 years, as you said, I was the president.
Yeah.
After 20 years, I was ready to move on. Or after actually my 10th year at Old Navy, I was ready to do something different. So again, I went to talk to my boss, and at that time, Mickey has moved on, so I had a new boss. And so I was actually looking at international job for Gap. But then I thought, maybe this is a good opportunity to step out of the Gap world and kind of find what's next. Being under that umbrella might not give me the opportunity to look a little bit further and broader. And so I thought this might be the time. This is after 20 years. So, and I was fortunate that I could do that, right? Not everybody is able to do that. So I look at that as an opportunity. So I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I just was going to take time off. And the first thing I did was really join a board. And so I could still be engaged in something. But in the meantime, I did a lot of nonprofit. I did a lot of things that mattered to me personally. Yeah. And travel. I did a lot of traveling because I always travel for work, but now this is really traveling for myself.
Yeah.
So I did that. So the first thing, as I said, was really join a board, and I actually had interviewed or talked to 6 companies, and I was fortunate that my leaving Old Navy was in the paper, so I got a lot of people knocking on my door.
Yeah.
And one of them, of course, was Kaiser. And of course, I know nothing about healthcare. I know nothing about medicine. So my first conversation with, of course, I had incredible respect for Kaiser. It's just because my brother worked there, and I knew a little bit. But the CEO and chairman at that time was George Howison. My first conversation with him was, first of all, I really believe in the mission. It's really about being well versus being sick. And how do you be well through your life in every stage of your life? And he said something. I said, George, I don't know anything about healthcare and medicine. He said, Jenny, we have a lot of people that knows that, but we don't have people that really know about people and our patient, our members, our with a consumer mindset. How could we serve them better? I thought that was very eye-opening. I thought that, wow, and I said, that I know. So I actually turned down all the rest of them and joined Kaiser is because of his mission and because of what his insight on healthcare is really about people. Yeah. And that's what I bring to the table. So I don't have to worry about not understanding, medicine and healthcare, because they do. They have tons of expertise. Yeah. But I bring a point of view that he feels that was very necessary to have in the board table.
Yeah. Incredible. And again, it shows the importance and the value of bringing these people who, aren't experts, but they bring this whole new, mindset and this idea where.
Exactly.
So I think that's great. And then so how did Charlotte Roos come up and take me through that.
Well, so there was a private equity that, was very interested for me to join the board. Yeah. But since I turned it down and went with Kaiser, they keep saying, Jenny, we'd love to buy your business and for you to be CEO. And I thought to myself, at that time, it was 2 years in, 3 years in. And I said, would I regret not being a CEO? And the answer was yes. I'm one of those people, I'm a big believer in never regretting anything in your life, even if you fail. Because to me is you don't want to look back in your life that you didn't do something.
Yeah.
So, and I was very honest with myself. I said I would be probably regretful. So I did. So they bought Charlotte Russe and I became the CEO. And there is a difference between being CEO and president, for sure. Because, at Gap Inc., we have a lot of share service. There's lots of people that really helped you and support you while, Charlotte Russe, you're it. The buck stops with you.
Yeah.
So I have to say, took the plunge, and I learned a lot through being a CEO, and I have no regrets at all.
Yeah. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems that throughout your career, when you've been given an opportunity, you often think about what would happen if I didn't take that role. Like if I wasn't president, and someone else came in for Gap Inc. and Old Navy, or CEO of Charlotte Russe. Would that be accurate? It's almost like thinking, okay, how would I feel if it didn't happen? And I think that's incredible. Yeah.
It is. That's how I look at things. I remember when I took the job at, Old Navy, since I told you I was employee number one. I can't tell you how many people came up to me and said, "Wow, Jenny, you're taking a huge risk." And literally, I never thought of it being a risk.
Wow.
I didn't. I literally thought, wow, what a great opportunity.
Yeah.
So I just maybe it's how I look at things, because to me is even if it failed, I could always go back and do something else. Yeah. But if you didn't fail and you succeed, gosh, what this will lead you to, right? Mm-hmm. So I just think it's just different mindset, and not being scared to fail. And I have to say, if I look back at my career, with all the successes, but what I learned the most is when I fail. Yeah. And I think when you learn not to be scared of that, I think it opens up so much more potential and opportunity when you have that kind of mindset.
Yes, I agree. And I think that's so important. And it brings up, the topic of failure, which is really important. I love talking to my guests about it. So first, tell me a time that you did experience a big challenge, and now, probably in the moment it was a little tough and it was hard, but now reflecting on it, it's really brought you the most lessons and value. So what is a time in your career that you can think of?
I would say that there's so many, right? But I would say one early on at Old Navy. I remember it was probably the first time that our partner and I disagree on something. Okay. And we like I say, we started the business with 11 people, and we were in this big conference room with 20, 30 people trying to solve this issue of, should we have a coffee cart? Should we serve food in the store? And I said no, and he wanted to push. And then we were next day going to go to, see Mickey about it. And it turned out to be total a distraction, a bomb. Wow. But you know what? But the mindset of trying something new, especially in a startup, is so important. Yeah. It's okay to fail, but the few things that were successful really propel you. So that was one thing of not, again, in startup mode, it's okay to try things. Yeah. But you have to know when to move on too, because sometimes, it is time to move on, and sometimes you don't. You keep hanging on to it, because when you hang on to it, then you can't do other things, right? So when to know when to let go. Yeah. And I think the biggest failure is probably Charlotte Russe. I mean, we were about to go public, and it was when the whole business or the whole traffic in the malls slowed down. And we were probably one of the first to feel that. And we actually did not know what happened, right? Because we had 4 years of incredible growth and about to go, public. Yeah. And what happened? And so we pulled it so we could learn about it. And then this is the beginning of the entire shift in retail to digital, from not to say bricks and mortar is not important, but what is the balance between that? Yeah. And being in private equity, it was time for them to move on. But we just didn't have enough, how should I say, capital to really invest in the business, to really transform it. But so going through that whole period it was very difficult. But you know what? What I learned from it is, business will change and how could you stay ahead of it. And also I'm also a big believer, you have to admit when something is wrong so you could fix it. So many people don't want to ever admit when something is failing and something is wrong, because I think then when you don't, then you're not going to find solutions. So in the end, we did liquidate the business, and it was hard. But then I think it was the right thing. We probably were ahead of our time, and you look at retail today and how much it has changed, right?
Yeah.
We're probably ahead of what everybody's experiencing. We would have never have survived through this.
Wow.
And sometimes change is hard, but I think it's very necessary, because in the end of the day, we're here to serve a customer, a consumer, and he or she is the one who decides how they want to shop, right? And what they want to buy and how they buy it. So I think being on so many of my now other boards has also taught me there's just multiple ways. The old way was great then, is not the right, business model for today.
Yeah, definitely. And so you mentioned, Jenny, I can honestly talk to you for so long, but I'll ask you one question before we wrap up to the fun questions, which is, now today, being a member of the board for these incredible companies, Poshmark, Levi, Strauss. So I'm interested, was this kind of a hard challenge, hard transition to being, from CEO, like in the company, up to you doing what's now kind of taking on a sideline role? Was that hard or tricky, or how was that transition?
Actually, I think I would say in the beginning, that's actually why I joined Kaiser, is because I can't run the show. You know what I mean? I think if I, went from, Old Navy into another pair of retail, I might be a little bit overbearing. You know what I'm saying? But being a Kaiser, I can't, because it's not what I know how to do. So I think that transition was good for me.
Okay.
So, and then when I joined Levi's, even though I was brought in more as the quote unquote merchandising expert, but it's really learning about the whole business. I have so much to learn because it's a global brand, international. So there's lots of pieces actually. I don't know wholesale. So I would say you have to really understand what you bring to the table and what's your role. And good thing is it's an incredible brand. Chipper is a great CEO. So I actually learned a lot through my being on a board. So it's really a two-way street. You learn as much as you contribute.
Yeah.
And your role is not to operate, right?
Yeah.
So it is a transition, but as long as you keep reminding yourself. So now, through how many boards I've been on now, it's actually quite easy. And so much of the board interactions are not always in the boardroom, it's outside the boardroom too. So I love being on a board, especially in a company that I respect. And I choose pretty much all my boards based on the CEO that's running it.
Yeah.
I have to have incredible respect for him or her, and that I know that I could have a good relationship, and that I could contribute, I could be impactful, and I want to be part of their company to help them grow and be successful. And to me, that right now is probably one of the most rewarding things I'm doing.
Yeah. Oh, Jenny, you just sound, I just love it so much, because really you can tell that you're driven by, the people. The people are at the core, and then also just that taste for learning. You're learning now as a board member for Levi, even though you've been in this industry for years. So it's really incredible, and just, also translating the idea where it's okay to fail and be comfortable failing. And that's important as a leader, to really translate that to the team members, to know that it's okay. So I've really learned so much, but one thing, so final questions. Tell me now, Jenny, what is a passion or hobby you have that's completely unrelated to your work? So
since I was, I told you I'm a home ec teacher, I love to cook and bake. Yeah. Baking is like my favorite hobby.
I love it.
And I'm actually trying to write a cookbook right now.
Oh
so
my God, incredible.
I've been baking and cooking since I was like 12.
And what's your favorite thing to bake?
I actually have perfected a chocolate chip recipe that my kids and my friends would think is like the best of the best.
Chocolate chip cookies? Is that what you said?
I probably have baked over 50 plus recipe.
Wow.
And I cobbled together a few of them to come up with this one. And so, I know it sounds simple. The simple things are the hardest to make.
Wow.
So I would say chocolate chip. I used to have a favorite thing to do when I was at Charlotte. Every summer we would have a big barbecue or, cook out. And I always would make ice cream sandwiches for the entire organization.
Wow.
So I would bake hundreds of cookies, and then I would hand make each ice cream sandwiches for the team.
Oh,
and then, of
goodness.
course, our whole leadership team would join me in it. But,
Wow.
I think it's so important because people spend so much time at work. I want them to feel not just part of work, but part of the family.
Yeah.
So I think cooking always is one of nurturing and it's bring happiness to people. So that's kind of my way of giving back to them.
Oh, I love it. Okay, last question is, what is a fun or weird talent that you have that no one really knows about? So a hidden talent. But Jenny, first, I'm going to go and give you my hidden talent. So I'm going to show it to you. So what I do at the end of every episode is I throw blueberries into my mouth. All right, so here we go. There we go. All right.
Okay, I don't have that talent. Okay.
It's okay.
My talent, which actually I'm very proud of, is that I could almost sleep anywhere, especially on a plane. So I flew red eye do pretty much 90% of my career. Especially to New York, I would fly, at 10 o'clock, sleep on the plane for 4 hours, 5 hours, and then wake up and I would be going to work.
Oh my goodness.
Or if I was flying overseas, I would sleep the whole way through and I would land there in the morning and I would go to the office for the next 12 hours. So
Incredible.
Sleeping anywhere, anytime is a talent of mine.
Definitely
so
a talent.
So I'm really proud of that.
That is, I wish I had that talent. That is 100% a talent. I love it. That's great. Well, Jenny, I have to say it's been so fun and I've really loved getting to talk to you and just, these so many incredible lessons that you've shared, and I'm just so excited for people to really be inspired by you. So thank you so much. I appreciate you.
You're welcome. You're so welcome. And it was really lovely to spend time with you and just chat.
Of course.